Welcome to the Sales for Nerds podcast. I'm Chief Nerd Ruben Swartz. If you feel more comfortable with SQL than sales calls, more at home writing test suites than proposals, more interested in crunching numbers than shaking hands, if you think networking should be about routers rather than cocktails with strangers, and if you're more interested in debating code editors than negotiating deals, but somehow you ended up responsible for some of those sales and marketing activities, this is the podcast for you. Tonight, I'm excited to welcome Justin Foster, who's here with me in Austin, although we're talking remotely. And he believes that nothing really matters until you connect to the heart, and that when you connect to the heart, it kind of changes how you live, lead, and also how you brand your company. Along a journey that started on a cattle ranch in Eastern Oregon to 49 states and 6 countries, Justin has worked with leaders of every sector and industry to help them create vibrant, relevant, and mission-based brands. He's the co-founder of the branding firm Root and River, and he's a relentlessly optimistic advocate for unleashing the power of being human, and a vocal supporter of leaders who want to eliminate all that is average and stale in their organization. So Justin, welcome to Sales for Nerds.
Well, thank you, Ruben. Thank you very much.
What do you have in your glass?
I have some Ben Milam, and he was one of the heroes of the Texas Revolution. So this distillery named this particular batch after him. So, all
right, very good. And tonight, I should mention, we are doing a whiskey episode instead of a wine episode. I've got some Ardbeg 10-year-old Islay Scotch, and it's delicious. And since it's below 40 degrees here in Austin, it's kind of like it's the dead of winter. So we're switching to whiskey tonight.
Absolutely.
So, Justin, how did you get from Eastern Oregon to Austin and discover sort of connection between spiritualism and marketing along the way?
Well, it's been a hell of a journey. I grew up, as you mentioned, on this cattle ranch in Eastern Oregon, and I grew up in a very dichotomous situation where the ranch life was great. It was free. It was hard work, but there was a freedom to it and a sense of heritage to it. But my home life was very abusive and violent. And so I still, at 47, remain somewhat dichotomous in many different ways. Thus, this, no surprise that in developing our practice of Root and River, that we blend spirituality with practicality. Anyway, end up in Boise, Idaho, for 20 years.
Okay.
And just began to feel a bit stale there, and in August of 2014, actually a little sooner than that, but we got down here in August of 2014 to Austin, and for no other reason. I mean, there's a lot of reasons: warmth and better airport and music and everything. But the best way to describe it is I was called here. This felt like where I belonged, and it's the first place I've been to that feels like home.
Even though you had never been here before.
Yeah, I'd been here a couple times, but it was the first I remember. It was March 7th, 2012, driving up Mopac with Coke FM on, and the windows down, which, in March, and you don't have your windows down in Idaho, and listening to real country music, not crappy pop country.
Okay.
And I remember calling my wife from the hotel saying, I think I might want to live here someday. I just didn't know that someday would be so soon.
Okay. And then what about professionally? How did you get into having your own firm, working with branding? It's probably not things that most young kids growing up on a cattle ranch say, you know what I'm going to do?
Well, I was a survivor. I got married young, still married to Lena all these years later. I was 18, she was 19. Then we had Logan, who's now 25. And I was always been a survivor, a scrapper. And along the way, got into a sales career, and that was my corporate career for from the mid '90s into the early 2000s, about a 12-year stretch, and really learned sales, B2B sales, and worked my way up to being the vice president of sales of 2 different companies. And I thought I was done. I thought that was going to be my career. And we got our company that I was the head of sales for. We got our parent company sold us, and I didn't want to go work for the new company, and neither did some other guys that worked with me. So we started our own marketing firm around this idea that sales and marketing should get along, as opposed to be against each other. Yeah, so radical in 2003 in particular. And that was the first foray in mid-2003 into self-employment. And it went through derivatives, and really became to come into full bloom as an idea about 4 years ago when I met my now business partner, Emily Sicorsi, and we had this meeting of the minds, meeting of the souls, but the work, the practical part of understanding marketing and every aspect of marketing, that all came from that period from 2003 to 2014 of just failing and getting back up and winning and having a whole variety of clients. I temporarily went and was the CMO for a couple of different companies along the way. But that real awakening of this idea that Root and River became was really in January of 2014.
So we're going to come back to that in a second, but let's go back to your first sales job. How did you land there?
I bugged them until they hired me. Lena had just had Logan. I was an administrative assistant for in an office, making I think like $11 an hour.
Okay.
And I was like, this isn't going to work. And I did this company called J. Thayer Company, which is a 100-and-some-year-old company back then, an office supply company. Their sales rep would come by, and I just thought she had a cool job. It's like, that'd be a cool job. I like office supplies. I like people. I've been an administrative assistant. I understand what these people need. So I had her introduce me to the owners, and they didn't want me. They were like, we don't have a territory. And I'm like, give me a territory, you don't work. And I just bugged them. And finally, they agreed that I could come on. I did not, but I had to be 100% commission, and I didn't get any sales support. I didn't get an admin or anything.
Okay.
It was just me. And I became in their 100+ year history, their highest grossing first year sales rep ever.
Now, so before people think you're some kind of magician or wizard, or maybe you are, right? Most people, they get their sales job and they struggle for a while. And then, if they end up on podcasts or whatever, eventually they figure out how to be the top sales rep. You're coming from a non-sales role. You had to beg for territory that nobody else wanted. They don't give you any help. How did you become immediately the top sales rep?
Well, it's a great question. One of the great there's many advantages of growing up on a ranch is I know how to work hard.
Okay.
And also it was driving around in my 84 Cavalier trying to get, office managers to buy office supplies was so much better than being trapped in a job I didn't like. Or it was so much easier physically than, feeding ungrateful steers at 30 below.
Right.
Or driving around in a circle in 105-degree heat, raking hay, all of that.
So you're like, hey, this job's actually pretty easy.
That's right. And that was my perspective. That's why it's mentioned in my bio about being relentlessly optimistic is, despite all these other issues that I was dealing with in my life, I was very optimistic, very relentless about it. And it's a detriment at times, but I just don't quit. And I just worked and I figured worst case scenario, I'll get kicked out of somebody's office for bugging them too much. But most of the time, little charm, little storytelling, 100% honesty, never, BSing anyone. All of that led to the sales career. And that was my first sales job. Then that evolved from there into other industries over that was 1992 when that happened.
Did they give you any training, or how did you learn like just the basic nuts and bolts of what do I say to people?
I didn't get anything. I got a catalog.
And so how did you decide what to do, who to visit, where to go, what to say?
So I knew that if I could get in front of people, I would be way better than working the phones. And besides, I wanted to get out. So what I did is I went to where people didn't call on them for office supplies. And keeping in mind, this is in the very early days of Office Depot.
Okay.
And Office Max. Very early, there's like one store, and this is in Portland, Oregon. And so regional or small or catalog office supply providers were really who was out there. Well, I knew these people weren't being serviced. So I focused on three things. I focused on small town government, like Molalla, Oregon, and Woodburn, Oregon, and all these little towns out in the periphery of Portland. And I got a bunch of them, and they're very regular and they pay well, and, margins are lower, but the volume's high. The second thing I did is I went after, in the same areas, I went after manufacturing. And because I figured manufacturing goes through a lot more office supplies than you realize. And then the third thing I did is I had a list of I think they called them Maverick accounts or open accounts. And they were accounts that people had tried to sell into inside of Portland. And I just went to see them. And I just began to get this pattern, I guess you could say, as I could read people. And maybe that was the first time that I, without really, maybe very much at a subconscious level, understood that I had the power of intuition.
Okay. And so I get that maybe 90% of sales is just showing up, and you were actually showing up when nobody else was. So that's helpful. But still, you could walk in the door and not be helpful and not close any deals. What were you doing that made them want to do business with you? Were you saving them money? Were you helping them do different things?
Yeah. So a common thing that I would ask, and I still, to some extent, I'm being self-employed. I still do sales. It's just different circumstances. There's a question that I've asked, and I just instinctively knew to ask it is, what do I need to do to make you look good? I meant it about them, not the office supplies, because who gives a crap about that? That's the commodity.
Right.
What was the win for them? That's really what I focused on. And for some people, it was they were going to buy local. For another office admin type, it was going to be that they saved a little bit of money. A lot of times, it was that they would run out, and it wasn't good for them. So, the office would run out of copier paper or something, and it wasn't good for the admin, the office manager, to have that happen. It wasn't good for their personal brand.
Right.
I didn't even know what that was back then, but that's what it really was going on. So I always made it about them, and then I made it about me. So a common thing, as I would say, is what do I need to do to make you look good? And they would tell me most of the time, and I would say, well, here's what you need to do to make me happy. You need to place at least one order, just one, and see how it goes. And I'll hand deliver it. And I did. I hand delivered all of them, the first orders. And then I would talk about my story. I grew up on a ranch, and I had a son, just one son at the time. I was trying to make it as a young father. And was I working them a little bit with sympathy card? Hell yeah, I was. Because when you're trying to be a provider for your young family, you do what you need to do.
Yep. Okay, great. So now we've got a little background, and so I can see how you're sort of reading people, you're helping people, and you're just working really hard because to you this is so much easier than actual ranch work. And I think we forget about how hard farming is when we look at it through the rose-colored nostalgia glasses. And so let's go back to 2014. You start Root and River, and you've got this notion that sales and marketing should actually get along. It's something that I find kind of funny a lot of the time. You've got two folks who are two departments or folks, or sometimes it's even one individual who's just got a little bit of a split personality, depending on what they're doing at the time, but they're all on the same team, right? How come they don't get along, and how did you realize this was something you wanted to go address?
Well, I really started down that road and well before Root and River. I just wasn't able to articulate it as much until I met Emily. But I think there's a couple of factors here, Ruben. One is that social and mobile came along in the late 2000s, and especially social. When YouTube and Facebook and all that came out, and it tilted marketing away from classic saturation and the 4 Ps and all that stuff that doesn't work anymore, and it tilted it much more towards relationships. And that's how, as a B2B sales guy, all the way up to, VP of sales of a couple of decent sized companies, that's what I did.
Right.
And so when it began to apply it to marketing, it was basically using the same exact principles from selling, which is tell the truth, find out what their needs are, and be a human being.
Okay.
And so that went on, and it proved it in a couple of different areas. And it really came into focus when Emily, who was the head of marketing for a behavioral assessment company in Scottsdale, had me come in and help them with a rebrand. And this was less about a conflict between sales and marketing. I mean, it was indirectly. It was a conflict between building a brand or being a sales organization.
Okay.
And they had been a sales organization for years. Like selling was their primary thing. And I was a heretic to that, especially as a former salesperson, to come in and go, if you really want to sell, you build a brand and that creates attraction, then it just makes it a lot easier to sell. And that was this moment of, where the two worlds kind of truly came together, of sales and marketing for us.
Okay. Now, a lot of folks out there say, oh, building a brand is important. And I know I'm hanging around too many marketing people when I start using brand in as different parts of speech, like it's a noun, it's a verb, it's whatever.
Right.
What does it really mean? And what is a spiritual brand?
Yeah. So, first of all, because of the massive changes in society, what we call natural forces, we have to throw out all the old definitions on the marketing side of things. Marketing isn't marketing like it used to be. Just, things change, things evolve, and that's okay. You upgrade your definitions. And branding for years, really about 70 years in particular, in the kind of the golden era of advertising, brand was the candy wrapper, the external image. And it didn't really matter if the candy wrapped around the candy wrapper inside it was a poop sandwich.
Okay.
Because marketing could sell it. And that was the art of persuasion and all that other stuff.
This is like the Mad Men era.
Exactly.
Like if you've got a flashy enough ad, it doesn't matter.
That's right. And marketing can fix anything. Well, when social, mobile, millennials, a bunch of other things started coming along, that all changed. And so in that change, then is this new definition of branding that we talk about all over the world, which is a brand is how other people experience what you believe.
Okay.
And that's it.
Brand is how other people experience what you believe.
Right. Whether you're a solo brand or you're a big giant multinational company.
Okay.
And so if it is what you believe, then brands have a spiritual element to them. When I say spiritual, I mean like a soulfulness or a movement down that's not an intellectual thing, and which led us to this thing that we also talk about all over the world, which is all great brands are spiritual experiences. You feel it in your soul. And you can, Patagonia and Southwest and Yeti and, going down the line, they all feel like a spiritual experience, and because it's coming from a place of sincerity.
Okay. So we're not talking about a replacement for religious spirituality, just to be clear.
Mm-mm. That's right.
We're just talking.
Please no.
Okay. We're talking about something that has some kind of emotional connection.
Right. Exactly. And emotional, but even deeper than that, if you go into brain science, it's really a subconscious attachment to an idea.
Okay.
In a healthy way. And so the root of that is mission. Your mission is where we always start, not mission statement. Mission statement is usually evidence you don't have a mission.
Right.
And it's like a slogan is evidence that you don't have a message.
Okay.
But mission is where we start with an individual or a team or an entire company. Because that mission is like this little container of the beliefs.
So what would be an example of a good mission?
So our mission, I'll just use ours. Our mission at Root and River is to inspire leaders to go inward.
Okay.
So missions are unique in that they always advance humanity. So when you see a mission that's about, we want to increase shareholder value, that's not a mission. That's a business model and an intention, and that's fine,
right.
But it's not a mission. The second thing is that you can invite other people to it. So our idea that leaders should go inward is an idea that others are also talking about, like conscious capitalism and community-driven brands and sensibly sourced and all that stuff. It all kind of falls into that same genre. And so there's that, and then the other element of mission is it's a bit terrifying.
Okay.
It's like we got to go. Because it's coming from a place of great depth. It's not some intellectual exercise to put something on a poster and hang it on the wall that people forget.
So why is that terrifying?
Because it feels bigger. It feels like, as often it'll feel like heresy to an owner or to a leader because they think their mission is to run a profitable business. That's their role. Their mission is to use their brand, their business, to advance humanity. That's what makes a Patagonia different than some other, outdoor gear company.
Okay.
Because everything they do is about why they're here.
And so when you interact with a spiritual brand, you basically join their mission at a deeper level. You don't simply transact commerce with them. You might do that as well, but you're basically joining in their mission.
That's correct. Yeah. And that's why we have a strong filtering system for who we do business with, because it takes a special chemistry in order to do this work. But there's a natural extension to it, and it ends up being where a contemporary brand needs three things. It needs a voice. It needs an authentic, sincere voice.
Okay.
It needs a consistently memorable experience. You can be memorable a couple times. You make one good pie, it does make you a pie maker.
Okay.
And the third thing it needs is a compelling story, like the true elements of a story, not well-crafted marketing BS. Well, you reverse engineer from that. Most organizations may say, well, we want a voice, we want experience, we want story. But what they're missing some things. The first thing they're missing is the will to want to be a brand. Because to them, maybe a brand is their logo, or this idea that you organize around your belief systems, you make your mission your differentiator. You got to want that.
Right.
It's not going to be something we're ever going to talk you into. The second thing is you have to have the courage to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 21st century, you cannot build a brand around being slightly better.
Right.
You must be different, but it must be really different, not fake different, not Mad Men different. And then you need to be willing to do the work. You need to have someone that's willing to do the work in your organization, because marketing is a daily habit. It's not something you do. It's not campaign oriented anymore, especially if you've got a sales team. Marketing is the air war to the sales ground war, and you got to do it every damn day. And you got to do it well and consistent. And if you don't have you don't have the will to get someone to do that work, it's not going to happen. It remains very esoteric.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned these mistakes, because one of the things that I always find with my customers, and certainly a mistake I've made myself in the past, is saying, me as a small business owner, I'm going to make my company look like some giant faceless organization, and I'm going to destroy all of the cool aspects of my brand and look like somebody who's got a terrible brand. And this has actually come up a few times on the podcast, right? Because we all, or not all of us, but I think most people start off with a little bit of insecurity, and so they go look and they mimic what they think is the most quote unquote professional example of what they're trying to do. And they get rid of everything that makes them special and everything that makes someone actually want to do business with them. And I see it time and time again. These folks who run these small businesses, and if you talk to them about what they do, you get them away from talking about their business per se, the nuts and bolts. They do have a deep spiritual mission and a connection to their work and a connection to the people that they're helping. And they do everything in their power to hide it and cover it up and not let you know about it.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really good observation. And I think we've been taught, especially Gen Xers and above, that the gap between our mission, our work, and our relationships there's supposed to be these huge gaps. And Emily and I challenged that. We're like, what if they weren't? So, like, for example, on Thursday, we have a client in Phoenix, a logistics company with a big sales team. It's a perfect kind of example for this. We are going and working on everybody's mission in the company, individual personal mission. We're going to do a workshop on that. And that the owners, these two guys that own the company, would be willing to invest in that speaks volumes. When it relates to this world between branding and sales, I speak at a number of different sales conferences and whatnot, or related to that. And I always say this is the very best thing leadership could do for a sales team is give them a product that doesn't suck.
Okay,
that's the best thing you could do. The second best thing you could do is brand it well.
Okay.
I see it time and time again: bad product, bad marketing, and then they think they've got a sales problem. They don't have a sales problem. They have an everybody knows you suck problem.
Okay.
So,
and as you pointed out, right, I'm assuming that even though you were a very successful sales rep from year one, you weren't the world's greatest salesperson. You had a product that didn't suck. You had a great personal brand. You made things happen.
Yeah, I didn't read anything that would be considered a sales book until 2012, and I read The Go Giver by Bob Burg.
Okay.
Which was, I didn't read anything. I observed a lot. I watched the better salespeople. I watched a lot of failure. I just observed. I still do that. Still observe, other companies and the way they do things. And it's one of the reasons why we're not an agency, because I don't want an agency model. It makes you very prescriptive.
Okay. By the way, how was The Go Giver? I've never read it.
It's phenomenal. It's a narrative or a fable about the five stratospheric levels of success, and it's where I understood the power of reciprocity.
Okay.
I sort of knew it intuitively or like on the surface, but then I really was able to dig into it, which is this, very similar to Ken Blanchard's servant leadership model.
Okay.
It's basically servant-based selling, but not in a subservient way, I represent your interest way.
Okay.
And I still use that. Still, Emily and I both have that same principle of just always do right by the client, unless it's going to cost you value, and then you got to say something.
Okay. All right, cool. I'll put a link in the show notes to that book, and maybe I'll finally get around to reading it. Now,
yeah, it's pretty short.
For folks who are saying, gosh, this all sounds really good, right? I'd like to have a lot of folks have a product or a service that doesn't suck, but they're really lacking on the brand. And I'm guessing some folks are going to be listening and saying, "Gosh, yeah, I'd like to have the courage to be different and to really live authentically through my business and not feel like I'm putting a mask on and hiding behind a wall of corporate jargon when I go to work." Mm-hmm. How should people get started, other than obviously calling you up and giving you some money?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's 2 or 3 things that you can do right now. If you're listening to this, you can, as soon as we're done here, go to your website. That's the easiest place to start, and look for what I call plastic flowers. Plastic flowers are the cliches, industry jargon, buzzwords, and get rid of all of them. If you have the power to do that as the owner or head of marketing or sales, and you have the power to get rid of all of them, and that strips the language down to human language. So that's a hard step to do if leadership is in love with the buzzwords. Mm-hmm. It's an easy step to do if you're the leader and you're in charge.
Right.
So kill the plastic flowers. The second thing is to look at your time on site. If you have Google Analytics, time on site is this sort of like canary in the coal mine of the health of a brand.
Okay.
And it's not, SEO people tell you all these different things. The only thing that matters to me in branding is time on site, because that shows a level of interest. If somebody you've already transacted with them, they've given you their time. And so that kind of leads to the third thing is, if you just consistently, and this is like yoga or weightlifting or nutrition, it's a practice, it's a habit. If you consistently told the stories of the people that you're helping on your website, you then get rid of the plastic flowers, and your time on site will go up exponentially, because you're switching from selling stuff to telling stories about people that you've helped.
Right.
Those 3 things, though, I would tell you, Ruben, 80% of companies don't do any of that stuff.
Yep.
And it's because their mindset is that marketing and sales are separate things, and they're not.
Now, what's a good metric? Is there a good metric or range or ballpark for how much time on site is quote unquote good or bad or whatever?
No, not really. I've wondered about that too. I think there's probably some industry norms. I would put it this way. Coming from my last full-time sales job was in a very complex sale. It was selling inventory control systems to retread plants. I think the more complex the sale is, the better it is for time on site, because they're researching. If you got a widget that you're selling through e-commerce for $10 and you got a bunch of time on site, that means that they don't believe you.
Or they're lost. They can't find their card,
or they're lost,
whatever.
Or they're digging around in your site. So I think there's some metrics along those lines. But the main thing is just to see if it goes up. Watch it.
Right.
As you begin to do some of these very easy, really free to do the most, updating your web copy, unless you've got some sort of weird relationship with your web developer, that's free or easy. And telling stories about your clients just takes someone to actually do it.
It's funny you mentioned that. I've got a document on my computer here that I'm working on for one of my customers, which is basically take my red marker to the site to get rid of I didn't think to call them plastic flowers, but that's what it is. And it's one of those people, if you have a one-on-one conversation, it sounds amazing. And then you go to the website and it sounds just like everybody else.
That's right. And you said it earlier, and you're the first, and I do a lot of these, and you're the first person to actually nail what the issue is. And you said insecurity, and that's what it is, especially with dudes. They want to look good, and they want to be right. And man, being a human being is sometimes not looking good and sometimes not being right.
Right.
And that's okay. But that insecurity, especially with male business owners, drives this endless and futile pursuit of acceptance that never happens. And that's why they do it. That's why they go, like you said, they go look at what their competitors are doing or some in the industry, and they were like, yeah, our website looks like theirs. Or they say like, well, we want to be the Apple of, crop insurance.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Don't be a damn karaoke singer. Make your own music.
Okay. So you can get rid of all this stuff, and I can see how that's going to help get rid of a bunch of garbage. And what about the folks who are really searching for, what is my message? What is my mission? Or maybe they started the business some years ago and they had a mission, but now it's changed or whatever, right? Like, I think a lot of people are spiritually lost. I don't just mean in the religious sense, but in the branding sense.
Totally.
They might be religiously lost too, but how do they refine their roots, if you will?
Yeah. Well, this is one that is, it's why we exist, because it's a little bit like cutting your own hair or doing your own taxes. It's it's going to be ugly if you try to do it yourself, and that's just the way it is. There's something about our own confirmation bias that it's almost impossible. I think it's maybe by cosmic design. It's almost impossible to find your mission and message on your own. I think it requires you to do something that's terrifying for a lot of leaders, and that's ask for help. But there's some things you can do to kind of get the wheels turning. And one is two exercises that are journaling, private. You don't have to share it with anybody. Exercises. Number one is write down the belief what you've always known to be true. So go back to the things that you weren't taught and you didn't learn; they just were there.
Okay.
That is the seed bed, because every single human being has, as part of their spiritual DNA, a set of core values that they were not taught, but that were part of who they are.
Now, is it okay if they were taught them later? Like, what if they learned them later, but it's really intrinsic?
I think in this particular exercise, you want to go to the intrinsic.
Okay.
You want to stay away from the extrinsic. Extrinsic is fairly easy to bolt on as an aftermarket afterthought.
Okay.
To please, your dad or your boss or something.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
That's number one. Number two is, what principle would you be willing to commit civil disobedience over?
Okay.
And one of the things about it is that business, in particular, small business, mid-sized business, is that they are steeped in rules and written and unwritten rules, and they have their own mini societies, and they've got these rules of engagement, and they must be broken.
Okay.
So if you go deeper and you don't make it about the business, you make it about humanity or society, and you're like, well, what would I be willing to commit civil disobedience over? Like Rosa Parks did, or Gandhi.
Okay.
They committed civil disobedience because they believed in something.
So that sounds great. Love Rosa Parks, Gandhi, great people, all that. The person selling crop insurance, what's their issue?
Everybody's got something.
And then do you go commit civil disobedience, or are you just trying to find kind of like where your real...
They're trying to find the root.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I believe strongly that X.
Yes, exactly. And maybe it's around... adopt, foster kids, or, maybe it's spaying and neutering cats. I mean, it's some sort of advancement of humanity or creation, but there's a civil disobedience angle to it, because it's really a test that if this matter that you would commit civil disobedience over, let's say it was, gay marriage or something, If you are not willing to commit civil disobedience for something you believe in down in your soul, then you're not going to commit civil disobedience, air quotes, in your industry. And you can't build a brand in the 21st century without pissing off some Pharisees.
Okay.
Some institutionalists that are like, well, that's not the way we do things.
So basically, you're saying you're going to have a really strong opinion and strong, not just an opinion, but strong beliefs and values about something that might be divisive in your target market, right? And part of your target market's going to go away because they disagree. And part of your target market's going to be attracted because they say, yes, finally somebody gets it.
Right. And every industry, and I say every, and that's not hyperbole, it is true. Every industry is in chaos, is in turmoil right now. And so in chaos, the only weapon you have is the truth. So that when you speak the truth with your message, whether it's with your salespeople or your, digital, whatever, when you speak the truth, truth moves people. It always does. There's no apathy with truth. It either moves you closer or further away, and you will drive some people away. And that's a terrifying thing for companies that have a lot of what we call PMSers that are in their client base, which is pale, male, and stale.
Okay.
And you can't do anything about the first two, pale and male, but staleness will kill your brand, especially if your customers have not evolved. This is why it's hard for family businesses to brand. This is a very common malady of family businesses, that the next generation gets this, but the old generation is still selling to their friends.
Got it. And I guess it's hard to have a family branding conflict.
That's right.
Right. A little different when it's just somebody that you might be friends with, but they're a colleague. Versus it's your dad or your mom or whatever.
Yep.
Now, one thing I noticed about the whiskey, unlike the wine, the whiskey tastes the same throughout the whole interview. The wine, it starts a little closed and it opens up as we go along. But how's your drink doing?
It's good. I got one of those round ice rock makers for Christmas, and so it's got I had dropped the rock in, pour some bourbon on top of it or whiskey on top of it, and its distribution of flavor is awesome. So it eventually gets watered down, but for a period of an hour, this round big block of ice is giving you that nice even flavor that you're looking for.
It's funny because when I started this podcast, one of the episodes I wanted to do was a quote unquote scientific investigation of the right temperature to drink whiskey, with different notions of room temperature, depending on, are you in Texas or Scotland? And then, I've got the metallic ice cubes that you can cool without diluting. And then, of course, you've got this trend towards bigger ice cubes with less surface area and so on. And I haven't actually gotten around to it, which is terrible. Thanks for reminding me.
You're welcome.
We got to advance, like you said, we have to advance humanity. That's what we're here for.
Bourbon advances humanity.
I think so. And you want to do it at the right temperature and right concentration.
Yes.
So let me just make sure I'm getting this correctly. First of all, if you grow up on a ranch, everything is going to seem pretty easy afterwards. Most of us do not start with that advantage. But if you're looking to get started on figuring out your mission, one thing you can do is just go look at your website and strip out all the crap. And if you have trouble seeing it, because I think we all have trouble seeing our own crap, just ask a friend to really go through it and nitpick it for you and say, is this really what you're doing?
Yes.
Look at your time on site in Google Analytics, and then do some journaling. What do you know to be true, and what would you commit civil disobedience over?
Right. And I would say this too, Ruben, that for anyone that's listening that is a sales rep, and let's say in that some sort of, where you are part of a team, or so you're not the leadership per se, it is a dedicated and necessary practice to work on your brand as a thought leader in your industry.
Okay.
You look at all of the in 2018, the high performing salespeople all have great personal brands. They write, they speak. They don't go to networking events and hand out business cards. They go to speaking events and speak about their passion, about their knowledge. And when you work on your personal brand, you're a connector, just like how we met.
Okay.
You met a connector that we both know, and he brought us together. That's a personal branding trait. And the thing when I speak to salespeople, and either internally or in big sales events, your personal brand is the one thing you have control over. You can't control price. You can't control whether the customer is going to say no or yes. You can't control the installation process. You can't control any of that stuff, but you can control your personal brand.
And that's true no matter whether you're inside sales rep who just started or whether you're the owner of the company.
That's right. And I would say this too, back to the spiritual aspect of it. If you don't like you, your customers aren't going to like you. It's that simple. Self-worth is the secret weapon.
Okay.
Not confidence. Not confidence. That's easy to fake. Self-worth is the secret weapon of contemporary selling.
Now, how do you get that if you don't have it or you feel like you don't have it?
That's probably another glass of whiskey, another podcast, but I'll say this shortly. I would just say it this way, is that you need to be willing to go into all your dark corners and not be afraid of what you're going to find.
Okay.
And a lot of people, especially Gen Xers and Boomers, they're kind of a construct. You know, they have a fairly large gap between their personal life and their professional life, especially in the sales world. And go into your dark corners with a flashlight and don't be afraid of what you're going to find, because there's nothing wrong with you, even if you've done some stupid stuff. That will be the beginning of it. The second thing is there's this great book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown that I'm listening to the audio on. And there's a line from there that just is permanently burned into my brain, which is, the power of choice can neither be given away or taken away, but it can be forgotten. And the simple exercise of owning more things that you have choice over, hugely powerful. Like even this simple thing, breaking up your morning routine, either your literal morning routine, getting up out of bed, but your sales morning routine. Break it up. Do something different. Show you have choice. You know, maybe use your sales calls in the afternoon. Do them in the morning. Do something different to show you have choice. And especially when it comes to fitness and nutrition, you have choice over that stuff.
It's funny. I feel like there's, I have this coffee mug that says, Lord, give me coffee to change the things I can and wine to accept the things I can't. But we spend so much time fretting and worrying over things we can't change that we almost forget about our power to change the things that we actually have a lot of control over, or at least influence.
That's right. And that has an exponential effect on your brand. And that's why, you know, whenever we work with a company that has a sales force, we act as if we work for the sales team, because they're the ones that got to close all the deals. And we require an investment in their personal development. You know, if our clients, or we tell our clients, if you're going to bring us in, we're not going to stop this at the leadership team. This needs to go out to everybody, but especially your salespeople and your service people, because they create the brand.
Okay. That's a good point, right? Who's actually talking to the customer?
And invest in them at a human level, not just on a skill set, learning how to, you know, Sandler your way to a deal that, you know, is going to make you feel guilty at night.
Okay.
So.
Well, Justin, thank you. This has been awesome. I appreciate it. It's nice to mix things up a little bit with the whiskey, and also to go into the more psychological side of things and what's going on inside our own heads that might be holding us back.
Thank you. Thanks for the great questions, especially maybe it was the Scotch, your Scotch and my bourbon, you know. So
it's not an accident that we have some drinks around here.
Well, I appreciate
cheers.
Cheers to you, and we got to talk about a lot of things that I'm deeply passionate about, and I'm sure that's coming through.
Great. Well, hopefully it's helpful to a lot of folks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruben.